All right, we have Dakotah Lindwurm, team and run coach and professional runner, and third at the U.S. Olympic trials. I'm Matt Urbanski with Team and Run, and we're just going to talk a little bit about Dakotah and her process and what got her to the point where she was able to put together such a phenomenal performance earlier this month in Florida. Welcome, Dakotah. I'm really happy to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I really want to, we asked a lot of team and run coaches and athletes ahead of time about what kind of things they would want to know from about you, from your experiences, because obviously there aren't very many of us that get to have the experience you got to have. Uh, what, like, obviously you were in a position on the day to have a great race and you put it all together, and it's not easy, and I'm sure it was really hard, but we're really interested in like leading up to this. Like, you ran collegiately. I've heard something like you had like a 22-minute 5K PR or something coming out of high school. So I don't remember all the details, but it was like, it was good, but it wasn't like, oh, this is an Olympian here, right? And so that's like maybe like 8 years ago. How tell us about like the process of you as a runner, right? Like, how do you approach the day to day as an athlete, and like how do you think about process in terms of like where you started and where you are now with your running? I know it's a really broad question, we can go lots of other places with it, but I think it's like a good place to at least start.
Yeah, it is super broad. I think I mostly try to think about like where I am today and where I want to be tomorrow. There's so many things I could say about this. And like the other side, just like for me, this is like a 24/7, 365 days a year kind of job. Like I don't think any day is a day off for me. And that's because I love it so much. I guess just really focusing, like I know that my goal is, let's say 4 years ago, I knew my goal was to be in the top three this year at the trials. And every day just working to get closer and closer to that goal.
Now, and that's awesome. I want to think about, do you love, like, every day, do you want to go out and run? Do you like, is you okay?
Yeah,
Is it okay to
I
say you
do.
don't? I'm a
um,
lifelong runner, and lots of times I'm like, I don't
yeah.
want to, no, I need to, so I go do it. But like, do you really
Okay.
love it? Like, you want to run every day?
Absolutely. Of course, I have the days. We all have the days that are like, oh, it's, -20. I just want to skip my double today. Or, it's super hot. I don't want to go out there. I'm super tired. Like you kind of are hesitant to go out for whatever reason. We all have that. And I am not immune to that at all. But it is like knowing that as soon as I start my run, it's going to it's gonna be enjoyable. And I had a teammate early in my career tell me, like, if you don't want to go out for your run, go run for 5 minutes. And if at the end of 5 minutes you're like, you know what, I still don't want to be running, then turn around and go home. But like every time I've thought about that, when I've thought I didn't want to run, you get 5 minutes in and turns out you did want to go for that run. And I think there's a lot of confidence and accomplishment that you can feel from going out on a run that you didn't really want to go on in the first place, and like completing that and saying, hey, I did it anyway. I did something really hard today anyway. Um, as opposed to like the days that feel super easy. Of course, you get confidence from those too, but like I think it's the days that are really hard that you can really pull um like accomplishment from.
Nice. That's good, because I think a lot of newer or recreational runners, and that's what a lot of the team and run athletes are, right? Like, you coach runners, they're like everyday runners, and they think, Dakotah or Matt or CJ or any of these like runners they look up to, they're like, wow, they must just love, I don't want to go run today. They don't want to run all the time. And it's like, no, I think it's like a muscle you build up over time, right? Like, you know you're going to get something good out of it. You know you're going to be glad you did it, but you have to start. And you
Mhm.
have to go through that just like everyone else. And you live in Minnesota, so you totally have to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of days that I don't want to get out there, but you get out there for 5 minutes, and it's not like, well, you know what, this isn't gonna be that bad. Like it's gonna be fine. And some days maybe it's hard the entire time, but you build resilience by getting through it anyway.
Maybe a bit more of a specific question about the process. I had a lot of people ask me or wanted to know about your buildup of your mileage over time, right? Like I had a coach who she's been running 60 to 70 miles a year or a week per 60 to 70 miles per week for years. And she's like, I just can't imagine building up much past that. I've been like stuck at that. Like, so how did you go? Because I've read or heard that you typically put in up to 130 miles a week. I've seen you on Strava, and I know you do the
Yeah.
work. Like how did you build that up over time to where you can do that kind of volume now? Because I imagine you as a coach, you wouldn't be like, oh, this is what I do. You should go run 130 miles next week too.
Right.
So how did
Yeah,
you get there?
it's a slow progress, and I think there's all types of all types of people. Obviously, I am personally somebody who thrives on high mileage, and that was something that's been pretty well known to me since I was younger. So I wouldn't say that like just anybody should go run 130 miles. If you talk to Annie Frisbee, another team run coach, she'll say that she thrives in shorter mileage, or like less mileage, I guess. So, but it did start, it was really a slow progress. I did not run very much in high school, and I couldn't even tell you how many miles a week I ran in high school because it was undocumented and I didn't have a GPS watch. But I know that when I joined my Division II team, I was running somewhere around like 50 to 60 miles a week that first freshman year. And that was a lot. I remember it being like a very big jump for me from high school. If I had to put a number on high school, I was probably doing like 30 miles a week at most. So I do think I made a big jump there. But then it's just been like a long-term vision of my coaches to like get me up in mileage. By the end of my college career, I was doing like 80 to 85 miles, and then I joined Minnesota Distance Elite, and my coach Chris Lundstrom just slowly pushed me up. Maybe my highest mileage was like 90 miles, and I would do that for a few weeks, and then I'd take a recovery week and maybe try to push to 95, not making any huge jumps. I wasn't going from 95 to 130. I did years and years of 100 miles was my longest or my biggest week. 110 was my biggest week. So it's certainly not all done at once. And even if you're just adding 3 or 4 miles from the last week, like that's still going in the right direction.
Yeah, nice. And for you, when you're doing these, say like 90 to 130 mile weeks, you have to be doing doubles in there. Are you like a lot of big singles, or how many doubles a week do you typically do?
If I'm doing 130, I am typically doing 5 doubles a week, and it'll look like typically like a 10-mile run in the morning and 7 to 8 in the afternoon. So it's two big runs if I'm doing 130 miles a week. If it's more like 90, it'll be maybe 3 or 4 doubles and more like a 10 and a 6.
Okay. And what about rest days? Do you have rest days ever built into your plan, or?
I don't typically have rest days. I'll get one rest day maybe every couple of months. But again, that's something that we just have decided works for me. It certainly doesn't work for everybody. Some people, I know plenty of professional runners who build in one rest day a week. And that's how they stay healthy and how they stay mentally, positive, and they don't get drained from that. So it's like, I wish there was like this clear-cut answer for everybody, but there's just not.
No, it's what makes this, I think, more interesting, because there are so many ways to get where you're going, and figuring out what works for you, and what you thrive on and what you enjoy. Like that's part of the journey.
Mhm.
What about injuries? Have you had any big injuries over the last like 6 to 8 years as you've really built up with your mileage and as a runner?
Yeah, I've had some tendon issues, which of course that comes from overtraining, just running 130 miles a week. Like I've got Achilles tendonitis, and I think I might just accept the fact I might have that forever. I luckily, knock on wood, haven't had any bone injuries post collegiately. But I get like, IT problems. And I think an important thing is like staying on top of that as soon as it hurts a little bit, like go take care of it before it hurts a lot kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think as a coach, that's something that irks me the most is like when you all of a sudden get a note from an athlete who's like, "Oh, this has been bothering me for like a couple weeks," and you're like, "No, like we should have been addressing this so much sooner." Yeah, I'd say just like staying on top of any sort of little niggle is important.
As just a quick side tangent, has being a running coach helped you become a better running athlete for your coach?
I would like to think so for sure. I still can sometimes see like those tendencies. I don't want to say bothered. There's tendencies that like you don't love in an athlete, and I can still see myself doing them as the athlete. Like, for example, if somebody is feeling like really anxious before a race, like it's so easy as a coach to be like, look at all this training you've done. You've done an immaculate job on this buildup. But then when my race gets closer, I'm like, Lundo, I don't think I'm ready. So like I do think it does help. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, what would I tell one of my athletes, but if they were in this position? But I mean, that's why you have a coach, is because
Yeah.
you need somebody who's level-headed and can see the whole picture for you.
Yeah. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Um, another question was on this journey, I'll just say like post collegiately to now. Have there been any big like inflection points where you thought, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not gonna make it as a runner. I don't want to keep going as a runner. Or like a moment where you're like, you had a breakthrough and you thought, yes, I'm getting there. I'm making the progress. Are any of those like key inflection points along the journey post collegiately?
Yeah, when I first graduated, I immediately started training for CIM with Chris Lundstrom. And that was in 2018 that I ran CIM. And I dropped out at like 18 miles, I believe. I was like throwing up. I just really don't think I was prepared for like taking in that many fluids mid race. And I remember like finishing and being like, this isn't for me. I don't think that this was the right career path, quote unquote career path that should have taken. And in those moments, that also happened again in just recently in 2022, when I dropped out of the New York City Marathon. I had like 6 really hard months of running, and I had like zero glimmers of hope, I guess. Like no workout was going the way I wanted it to. Every easy run felt harder than it needed to be. And in those moments, I think having like a really good support system is the only thing that can kind of keep you in it. When I dropped out of CIM, I called my mom and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Running a marathon is way too hard. And she was like, no, you're going to try again. So like having somebody around you who is, like willing to push you past like that feeling that you're feeling at that moment is really important. And, I think we can all think about that person who is there for them in those hard moments. And then on the flip side of that, of course, like um, running to 25:01 at grandma's kind of felt like okay, everything is clicking for me, and it feels like maybe I can make it in this very small world of professional running. And of course, just a month ago, not even February 3rd, that was a big one for me. I still like, even before that, it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to go down as being somewhat unnotable in this field. But obviously, like after February 3rd, I feel like I've made it.
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely an inflection point, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm curious, like we could take this question two different ways. Like your self-talk or like mantras, whether it's like during the race, like what kind of self-talk do you have in your head? And even like outside of racing, like in those times where maybe things aren't going well and every easy run feels hard, like what's the sort of like talk in your head that like, yeah, it keeps you
Yeah.
going or like helps sort of like helps you keep doing what you're doing as a runner?
Yeah. So during a race, this is a clear-cut answer for me. I always tell myself, I am strong, I am fast, my speed will last. That's kind of like my mantra. It's like super, you can kind of make it rhythmic. So like when I just kind of want to shut off my brain and just go, that's what I'm thinking. On those days, like the self-talk when you're out there on an easy run and you're like, I am like absolutely dying and like I don't want to be out here. Things are hard. Like this workout isn't going the way I want it to. I've just found that just being like, okay, we're at mile 4, let's get to mile 5. And at mile 5, we will readjust. And then we can think about how much pain we're in again. And then at mile 6, you readjust and you think about how much pain you're in. So like it's just kind of chunking it into like digestible pieces for me is what works the best.
And and you mentioned having a support system when things have been not ideal. Sort of like in your own head, like after you dropped out of CIM, like you said, this isn't for me. What else? Like kind of like eventually you got through it, and it sounds like your mom helped you get through it. We're all glad that your mom pushed you.
Me too. Yeah.
But like, I'm partially asking this because I've run a lot of marathons, I've run a lot of ultras, and I know how easy it can be to like go to negative like self-talk and like
Yeah.
beat yourself up and like talk yourself down. And um I feel like it's everyone has that kind of experience, whether you're, third in the Olympic trials or you're a 6-hour marathoner. And so I feel like it's helpful for someone who is an everyday runner to hear, oh yeah, you sometimes have to fight off the negative thoughts, like after a bad race or after like in a tough workout. So I don't know,
Yeah,
like,
it is not all easy on this side either. Trust me.
well, I'm glad that I love that mantra or the thought during the race, like having something that you can go to that like keeps you in a good headspace and like flows with your rhythm. I think that's really, really good stuff. What about fueling? This is a really specific question. Like, do you target a certain amount of calories or carbs? Like, how do you both during the race, and we'll talk about the race first, and I would love to also hear just like general thoughts on nutrition in your training in day-to-day life. I mean, I know REDS is a big issue that a lot of people are talking about right now. So like, just in general, not like with you, in general, it's like it's an important topic, I think, in running. So yeah, during the race, what are your fueling strategy? Like, what do you take in? How do you do it?
So I use Tailwind, and I actually just recently had a call with Tailwind because they were happy that I had given them a shout out before, and they were like, "Oh, tell us what your strategy is." And I am about to be just blown up. My spot's about to be blown up. I'm not super scientific with like,
Yes.
oh, I want to take this many carbs in or this many calories. I just know that I adjust my bottles that I usually get about every 5K or every 3 miles based on the warmth. If it's a cooler day and I don't want to take in as many or like as much fluids, if I don't feel like I'm going to sweat as much, I will make my bottle just a little bit more dense with
Right.
carbohydrates or calories. And then if it's warm, I'll do the exact opposite. I'll, make it more dilute just so I can get in the water as well. I don't have like this exact number because it is like fluctuating, I would say,
Yeah.
depending on the race.
And
But something that I like to just mention too is that like I think it's important on those warmer days, like at the trials, to add some sort of like sodium and potassium. Like I used Element T, for example, at the Olympic trials, and I took one packet and spread that one packet amongst all 6 bottles that I took in.
okay, just to add, because there's a little bit in Tailwind, but not a ton. So you added LMNT to the Tailwind. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, because you can't really, I mean, you certainly can OD on like sodium, not OD, but like you can do too much where it's
Yeah,
harmful for you, but it's pretty hard to do so. So
you might give yourself like unnecessary GI distress if you overdo it, I think.
totally, totally. So like don't do like one packet per bottle you're doing, but like one
Yeah.
packet over 6 is not enough to like do any harm.
And because most of us have not run in a race where we get our own bottles. It's just, it's like a perk of being as fast as you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like, do you have like 200 mLs? Like how much do you drink when you pick that bottle up at 5K and 10K? Like how much fluid are you getting in?
Yeah, if it's like we'll just say kind of like a perfect day, not too hot, not too cold,
Yeah.
I would say I'm doing somewhere between 4 and 6 ounces of fluid.
Okay.
And when it's like Orlando and it was pretty warm, I was trying to get all my bottle is about 8 ounces. So I tried to
Okay.
get all of it in until you kind of start to learn your body. And it's like when when it's really hard to get it down, sometimes that's when you know, take your foot off the gas and say, okay, I don't need to finish this bottle. I don't want to throw up. It's better to keep it down than it is to do too
Get
much
it
and then
full
throw it
extra.
up.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. And if you have say like 6 to 8 ounces on a warm day, are you putting in like one scoop of Tailwind, like 100 calorie, 100? That's roughly 100 calories for one of those scoops. I'm just
Yeah,
curious. Like,
it would be a scoop and a half per 8 ounces roughly.
okay.
Yeah.
And obviously, if it's a cooler day, you may still put a scoop to a scoop and a half in, but like it's less liquid, just because you don't need
Yeah,
as much liquid. Okay, very cool.
exactly.
It's good to hear how you do it. I'm a big fan of Tailwind. I use it in my ultra marathons. It's like my go-to.
Yeah, I just had a call with them when you're talking about how they're a little bit of a smaller company, a little bit less known, and it makes me sad because I think in comparison to other companies, they're so much easier to get down. Like the flavor is great. It's something you're like, even when I'm not running a marathon, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to, you know, have some Tailwind.
Do you have a favorite flavor? I have like 3 different flavors in my cabinet right now.
My favorite is tropical, and when you can get your hands on it, the DeWalter melon is also super good. But that's like such a limited flavor that
I've never had that one. I gotta find that.
so I think it's completely out of stock. I hope that they restock it. I think it was kind of a limited thing.
Oh, that's cool. And then what about like fueling just your training? Like when you run 100 to 130 miles a week, you've got to be getting calories in. Like, do you have a sort of like any sort of like not rules, but like general rules of thumb when you think about just like your nutrition from day to day, just so you can like stay healthy and like train well?
Yeah, I don't at all like count calories or anything like that. I do just try to stay really protein heavy. You know, I'm certainly still, of course, getting in carbs because that's what our body wants to run off of anyway. But I think a big thing that I've seen help me in the last 2 years has been just making sure I'm getting like totally enough protein. Like it shouldn't even be a question if I'm got enough protein in the day. I want it to be like almost too much protein.
Yeah.
Um, I'm somebody who is pretty routine. Like I know what works for me. So other than dinner, I would say almost every single day for me looks the exact same. Like I'll switch my dinner up every day, but from breakfast until then, it's pretty on the nose, the same thing every single day.
Well, then that begs the question. If it's the same thing every day, I can ask, what do you have up until dinner every day that's the same? Because that's special.
Yeah.
You can do that.
I do yogurt like right when I wake up in a half a bagel with like cream cheese on it. And that's what I'll have like before my races as well. I'll go for a run. I come back and have like like a smoothie with protein and like a protein powder inside of it and the other half of the bagel. For lunch, I have eggs and like some sort of burrito. And then for snacks throughout the day, it's like I always have like an apple, oranges, cheese, and cottage cheese. Or like
Yeah.
those are guarantees. I'm having those things every day.
Yeah. And you have that protein shake every day, which is like an easy way to ensure you're getting an extra like 20, 30 grams of protein, which is huge. So
Yeah.
cool. Like that all makes sense. It's good to hear like you can't run that many miles over and over year in and year out unless you're fueling the machine, I feel like.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, especially when I'm getting up into 130 miles, it's like I feel like it's just on my desk all day long. It's like I just have snacks constantly. I'm just constantly feeding myself. It's like there aren't even like meals at that point. It's just all blends into one big meal throughout the day.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I had some big training weeks with a buddy when we were living in Boulder, and we were doing like 100 to 110 miles per week at that point, which was really big for me. And we were getting so hungry. We were like, I'm just hungry all the time. I don't care about the run anymore. I just want to go home and eat. Like all
Yeah.
we wanted was food. All we could talk about was food.
And
And
I
that was
think
only
that
100
actually,
miles away.
yeah, but I do think that that brings up a really good point of like, yeah, 130 miles for me a week for me is like when I'm like that, where I'm like ravenous all the time. But that might be 30 miles a week for somebody who's just getting into running. That might be 100 weeks for or 100 miles if you're, you know, like you at that age or at that stage. So
Yeah. No, yeah. Everyone's like on their own spot on this running journey. And it's cool to
yeah,
hear like most of what you experience is like what someone else is going to experience. It's just like relative to where you're at in your journey, but there's still a lot of overlap, I feel like.
yeah, Totally.
Wow. Another thought that someone, one of our coaches asked was, how do you balance your life, training, coaching? Like you're training a ton. Like how do you, and probably like getting like 9 hours of sleep or how much you know, like obviously sleep is important. How do you make it all work?
Um, that's a good question. I think Annie and I have talked about that recently, is I don't feel like anything I do for running is a sacrifice, if that makes sense. So, I'm in bed by 8 to 8:30 almost every single night. And of course, every now and again, there's like a weekend where that just doesn't work out. But for the most part, like I don't really have like the FOMO of, oh, I want to stay up so I can do these other things. I'm like willing, I will say, quote unquote, sacrifice those things, but it doesn't feel like a sacrifice because it's like I know that's getting me one step closer to my goals. Um, and then like I work full time as a paralegal right now, and I'm also coaching. But I think for me, like running is the number one priority in my life. So the other things like for coaching or for paralegal, either of those, like I'm going to get my run done first and then I'm going to focus on those two things. And I don't think that people like if I think people respect that when you're willing to say like here's my number one priority and this is what I'm going to focus on. And I'll get to these other things as soon as I'm done, but like I want to carve out the space for this first. I guess if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. If you, I think people might be more just jealous that you have clear cut priorities
Yeah.
because like it's easier to, in some ways, to be like, no, the decision's already made. Like, this is the thing I care about. This is the thing I want to do. It's the thing I'm going to focus on. I'm going to get this done. Rather than sort of like, I feel like a lot of people may have to like juggle and be like, well, can I fit in the run today? I really need to go do this thing and I need to do that thing. Whereas you're like, no, I'm going to get the run done. Like, that's the thing that's going to get done. And then I'll figure out the other stuff afterwards. And I think there's, I mean, it's clear, it clearly is effective in getting results. And also in some ways, as you said, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice because like, it's not this like debate you have every day. It's just like, no, that's what I'm going to do. Like, that's how it works. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think you kind of have to create that routine too. Like even if somebody's sitting there right now and like, oh, I don't know how I could incorporate that into my life, like make that decision that like that's the first thing you're getting done for the day. I can't remember who said it, but like get your hardest thing done for the day. And a lot of the times that is like your run, right? Like that's going to be the thing that's easy to push off and push off. And the longer you push it off, the less likely it is to get done. So again, like you can quote unquote sacrifice a little bit of that sleeping in you do to like get out the door, get out the door and get that done right away in the morning. And I think the more you do it, the more it becomes a routine and a habit for sure.
and the less it feels like a sacrifice, it just feels like this is what I do.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. It's like your
and
morning
then
cup of
when
coffee. You just do it, you know?
yeah, and the more you do it, month after month, year after year, you go from being, you know, a good D2 college runner to running 225 and going to the Olympics.
Yeah, yeah. It pays dividends, I promise.
Yeah. um, I'm interested about, we don't have to go on too much longer, but I have a few more questions.
Yeah.
Coaching. You've had the same coach since you finished college, right? With Chris Lindstrom. Um, how has having, and I imagine you had a coach in college, you had a coach for your running, probably maybe all of your running career. How does a coach impact like just the whole experience? And yeah, you could get specific or general, but like how does a coach impact all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pivotal for me. There are gonna be select people out there who can coach themselves and keep a clear mind and a level head, but for me, it's like I always call it like I want to be like no think when it comes to running. Like here's what the calendar says and this is what I'm doing and I know that he's qualified and that he's got a reason behind why I'm doing this today. And I don't, while I can ask those questions and sometimes I do, I know that I don't have to because he's not just making it up on the fly. He's not just saying, "Oh, let's see how this goes." Like, let's see how this affects her. He's got a reason for it. And I like to just be like mind off and focusing on just getting the work done and somebody just tells me what work needs to be done. And then I think another key part to my success has been working with like the same coach for so long because I think we've talked about this before. It's not a marathon plan isn't like a 2-month plan. It should be a 6-month plan or a 2-year plan of just building up the mileage and the consistency so that you can, get the payoff of what happened last build and the build before that. Because at the end of the day, running a marathon or any sort of race is really just like building stepping stones on like a staircase is how I think of it. Like every marathon I've done has gotten me a little bit more fit, a little bit more fit because that whole build I was, obviously working really hard, and then the marathon itself is quite a workout within itself. So I think each time you when you have that consistency with the same types of workouts with the same coach, I think it really pays off.
Yeah, and for reference, you and I have talked about this before with athletes that you coach or that I coach, where it's like, sometimes a runner will come to a coach and say, "Hey, I just want to do, I'm doing the Grandma's Marathon in June. Can you coach me for that? I need 4 months. Let's do it."
Mhm.
And they think and then they're done. That's in their mind how it works. But in reality, the best results tend to come when you work with the same person for a long time, because you get to know each other, you respond to what happened in the first build, and you can adjust for the next one. And it's fun too. I imagine like I don't remember the nickname you had for him, but when you were talking about when you get anxious before races sometimes, and you even have a nickname for your, what was it like? What Chris?
Oh, his name's Chris Lundstrom, so we call him Lundo. Everybody calls him
Buildup.
Lundo. Yeah, yeah.
So you get to know him well, I imagine, and which is, it was very cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
and then he learns what I need before a race. So like what type of encouragement. And you can't build that over just a couple of quick months, when
yeah,
you only see somebody race once. So I think having the long-term coaching definitely helps and pays off.
nice. Um, Kind of a tangent here, but you went to Florida before the race. Like, I don't know if it was training camp or did you go there? How long were you in? Like, tell me about, again, someone might say the sacrifice you made, but like, what did you do? Like, was it a sacrifice? Did you go for a long time? What was this, you going to Florida before the race?
Yeah, so obviously I train in Minnesota. If you've been to Minnesota, you'll know that the winters are a little bit cold. They can be a
Yep.
little bit hard to run in, and the trials were in Florida and Orlando in February. So I wanted to be absolutely prepared for that. So I left the day after Thanksgiving. So I was down there for about like 2 to 2.5 months. And again, we're gonna say it was a quote unquote sacrifice because I wasn't at home with my family. I couldn't just go see my dad. Obviously I'm completely out of routine down there, but it's worth it because it's, getting me prepared for the trials. And obviously that paid off. I was able to withstand the heat because I was training down there the whole time. Again, doesn't feel like a sacrifice, especially when you live in Minnesota. It's
Yeah.
kind of a reprieve to get out in the winter, but that's why I was down there.
Of course. It's very cool. You didn't go alone. I saw some pictures of workouts with you and Annie Frisbee training together. Did she go down for a lot of the time with you as well? Or did you guys have or were you all by
Yeah.
yourself in Florida?
So for the first 2 weeks, I was by myself. She wanted to wait a little bit to get out of town, so I went to Ormond Beach, Florida, which is over on the ocean, kind of by Daytona.
Okay.
And then a couple weeks later, she drove down and we shared an Airbnb for the full 2 months together, which is also like if I could recommend like a little performance enhancing, we'll say drug, it's like get a training partner. It's
Yeah,
and have somebody else who's super motivated with like similar goals to you because if you're surrounded by like excellence, you're gonna rise to that occasion too.
that's awesome. And Annie had a great day. She finished 10th in the race. And
Incredible for her
yeah,
first Olympic trials. That's absolutely amazing. I'm so proud of her.
yeah. That's so cool. You both went down there together, you put in the work together, and you were both ready for the Florida heat, and you put it together for great races. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to share with team and run athletes or coaches out there, or just anything that I didn't ask about that we should tell people about?
No, I feel like we hit on some great points today.
Oh, I did think of one more, and I
Okay.
told you early on before the call, I was like, I don't need to get into all the race details. I think other podcasts have talked with you about that, but like, was there a moment near the end where you were like, I think I've got it, or like, were you dialed in all the way to the finish? I don't know, like what was it like as you were in the last like 2 or 3 miles?
Yeah,
Who's
so
your
when I had moved into third and Carolyn was behind me, and I know at some point Betsy was behind me, I remember being like, this is it. This is you're on the team if the race finished right now, but you can't think about that. So I just kept kind of putting it out of my mind, especially because I could hear Carolyn just right on me. And then at some point I heard, you don't ever really notice when somebody falls off of you. You don't, realize, oh, their footsteps aren't there anymore. So all of a sudden I heard 3 seconds back, and I was like, oh, I don't hear her. And then I heard 5 seconds back, 10 seconds back. And in those moments, that's when I'd be like, oh my God, like this is happening for me right now. But again, like you just never want to celebrate before the finish line, because we've all seen the videos or
Yeah.
seen articles where somebody celebrates too early and gets out kicked. So I really waited to celebrate until I had like 4 steps left.
Ah, that's so cool. Um, well, thank you so much for doing this, Dakota. It's really fun talking to you about it. It's really good to just hear about, I mean, all of it's great, but like I love that there's so much that went into it. It wasn't, you were not like an overnight success. You've been running a lot for a long time, and you put in the work and you built your life around it. And it's just awesome to see it like all play out for you like this. So congrats.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it for sure.
And thanks for being an awesome coach too. Like, I'm
Of
sure,
course.
I'm sure. So my athletes were like, "Did you see what Dakota did? It was amazing!" And like on the Team Run, like the Facebook, and we have a coach Discord group where the coaches were like, "Did you see?" And so
Yeah.
I imagine the people you coach were like super excited for you too. They're like, "That's my
Oh
coach."
yeah. I finished, and I think I had probably a message from every single one of my athletes that were so excited for me. Obviously I see all the hard work they put in, and
Yeah,
when we have conversations, they hear about the hard work I put in. So I think it's mutual respect for sure.
yeah. No, it's very cool. And um, congrats. Good luck in Paris. And thank you very much.